Hi, BookTube. Well, welcome to welcome to something not very scripted, which doesn't happen very often on this channel because I just can't. Okay, other presenters I know they do a fantastic job of winging it, and I have never been very good at that. I do have some point notes, okay, but they're very, very scanty, and that's only because I've got to talk about statistics, and I cannot remember numbers, details, and things like that. Just they flit out of my mind as fast as I read them and try to take them in. So we're going to have a little look at my half-year point because I have reached 6 months of my 12-month Read What You Own challenge. I cannot believe I've made it this far because 6 months is a long time. I notice other people's Read What You Own challenges, they're differently structured and they get through them much faster. A lot of people have finished one challenge and started a second one. I think Criminali has done that. And I thought, whoa, it's outside my ability at the moment to do it that way. Nevertheless, really pleased that I've completed 6 months. And also, about a week or so ago, we went down to London for the day, and the weather was fantastic, and that's where these photographs came from. We went to see Battersea Power Station, which has been rebuilt inside and is now an incredible shopping mall and parklands, where it used to be probably some of the grimiest industry area of the city. So that was really cool to look at, and I'll show you some photos of that as well, interspersed with me talking about how the 6 months have gone and what I think the next 6 months will involve and what I will think beyond the challenge. So we're going to divide this sideline video into 4 parts. First, we're going to look at stats because I love stats, and we're just going to see how have I performed in various metrics. There we go. That's a lovely word. That's a lovely data word, isn't it? We're going to look at my metrics, right? Then we're going to look at my burgeoning Read What You Own wish list and just comment on that a little. Then we're going to talk about how the challenge has changed me in some ways I did not expect. And then we're going to wrap up with my thinking on what I'm going to do when the challenge ends. Okay, books read. So you'll remember I set a target of 53 books for the 12 months. I have read 27 of those now. Interestingly, though, in the second quarter of this challenge, I read 13 of the 27 books, and that's actually 1 book less than the first quarter. And I think that can be, if you want to talk about the cause of that, it's most likely that I started to read longer books, especially longer nonfiction, during my second quarter. So I have 26 books left to read. That means I've got to get through 13 in each quarter. Now, most months I manage 4 books per month. That is my average, my standard feel. I'm pretty comfortable with that. But I have been able to, for at least 1 month of each quarter, I've been able to fit in 5 books, but that means carefully choosing those books. And so I've got to do the same thing for 1 of the 2 quarters. Is that right? Yes, at least 1 of the 2 quarters that I've got coming up in the year, I've got to squeeze in 5 books as part of my planning. Now, something I talked about in my first quarter wrap-up back in January was the difference in terms of number of books read compared to number of pages read. So if we talk about how many pages did I read, from November to April for the 6 months, I read 8,071 pages, and that worked out to an average of 1,362 pages per month. February to April, 4,058 pages, and that worked out to an average of 1,352 a month. So you can see there's a consistency in my reading in terms of number of pages. I'm around about 1,350 pages a month I can read. And that's a nice consistency in speed. It will help me set some realistic goals once the challenge is over. And I do want to talk about that. That really does matter to me. You can see this little table kind of helps you out as well. It shows you the fiction and nonfiction split. Because if we talk in terms of books, I read 18 works of fiction during the 6 months and only 9 works of nonfiction. So I've talked about wanting this 50-50 split, and I do. And I find in number of books that is trickier to do. It's trickier to get close to. So you can see I've got sort of a 66-34 split if we talk about books. However, if we look at pages instead, and I think this is really critical because it's very difficult to get short nonfiction, I think, that is good quality. Now, fiction, some of the shortest books can be the most impacting and profound. But with nonfiction, you sometimes need some page space to really make an impact. So with pages, you can see that I read, the split's a little different. It gets closer to 60-40, which I think is pretty balanced. And so again, this is why my mind is heading in the direction of maybe I should be counting pages rather than counting books. Maybe my goal setting shouldn't focus on books. It should focus on pages. So for example, if I took my average, which I felt was 1,362 pages for the 6 months, if I multiply that by 12, I'm looking at being able to read 16,344 pages in a year. So I could up that to something. I could challenge myself to get a few more pages in, but that would mean I could perhaps lower the number of books, the quantity of books that I want to read, and aim for more pages. Now, of course, I also had a TBR list. I had 12 titles that I wanted to read during the year. Now, I've read 7 of those, which I think is quite good. 7 of the 12 are done. And that leaves 5. But of course, those 5 are all longer books. And that's why I've kind of kept putting them to one side, going, well, maybe I won't read that because I won't be able to keep up with my book number count. So again, this is what's leaning me in the direction of maybe number of books is not the way to go with a goal, but we'll talk about that. Now, let's talk about how many of these books that I read, how many were gifts or library books or borrowed as opposed to actually pulled off my shelves as owned. Of the 27 books, 4 were library books and 2 were birthday gifts. 5 survive, and you're going to get a review very, very soon of Elizabeth Strout's Amy and Isabel, which I just finished last night. Oh, yeah, I totally understand why that author won the Pulitzer Prize. What an incredible piece of fiction that was, but we won't talk about that now. Later. Right, let's talk about how many were print books and how many were ebooks, because I think that's an interesting split as well. Between November and April, I read 19 print books versus 8 ebooks. So you can see that I still favor print books, even though I have so many ebooks on my Kindle. I favor print books. And I think more print books got read because my bookshelves are more easily visible. They're right in front of me in the front room. Whereas my Kindle app, I have to open it up to look at my library there. So what I might need to do is create an ebook TBR list just to ensure that I do enjoy my ebooks also. Speaking of ebooks, I'm also beginning to wonder if I need to invest in a proper e-reader rather than using the Kindle app and reading off my mobile and my laptop, just to reduce eye strain, because I think it's also the effect on my eyes. It's making me more inclined to read print books. Now, I'd be happy with a secondhand Kindle. I don't need it to be brand new. I would just need to know that it came from somebody reputable. Now, wildcard books. Of course, I allowed myself during the 12 months 4 books that I could buy. 4. Oh, I did that really well to camera. Look at that. I might be getting better at this. So 4 books. Now, I've purchased 3 out of those 4. Okay, so I'm a little ahead of the game, aren't I? I bought the Kindle version of Noughts and Crosses by Mallory Blackman. That happened back in January. I bought the Kindle edition of The Skeleton's Holiday by Leonora Carrington, and that was to help me a little bit with the close reading that I did with David at Polyglot Reader. I'll leave a link to that video if you missed it, because it was quite good. It was on his channel, by the way, not mine. That might be if you're going, what video on Leonora Carrington? Over on David's channel. I will link to it. And then the third book I bought while we were on this little trip to London, because of course we went to Foyles. And I disciplined myself. I did have some books to buy for somebody else as a gift, so I consumed most of my time deciding what those books were going to be, and then I allowed myself the purchase of a single book for myself. And I'm going to keep that a secret, because it is a book that has only recently been translated into English, but it has been around much, much longer. So look forward to that. Say no more. Okay, let's talk about my Read What You Own wish list that I set up on Amazon. I felt it would be a bit of a like retail therapy, like I could put the books on the list rather than buy them. How did that go? Well, the interesting thing is, at the 6-month point, that list is now 146 books long. However, something has changed. Let me show you this table. These are the number of books that I put on it each month because I kept very careful notes about the date that I added the book to the list and which booktuber recommended it, if it was a booktube recommendation, and a little bit about what they said of it. So you can see that I put a lot more books on the list in the first quarter of my challenge than in the second quarter. And so what I found, at the beginning of the challenge, I think I was just getting used to the feeling of not buying any books, particularly Kindle books, because it's so easy to add Kindle books, isn't it? You can just be sitting on your laptop, browsing in Amazon, and just keep throwing books into your Kindle. You find something for 99p, in it goes. It happens in seconds. It doesn't even feel like purchasing in the real sense that you might think of in a bookshop, when you've got to physically go there, physically pick up the book, physically take it, etc., etc. And yet gradually it seems like I'm needing this virtual, I don't know, storing up of books, hoarding of books. That's what it sort of felt like at the beginning. I seem to need it less and less, and it flares up now and again, flares up, but mainly I'm finding it quieting down. I'm feeling less need to gather books. I feel like, oh, I've got a lot of books. I'm fine. I seem to be reaching a point of security about the number of books that I have. Have I found a way to read any of the books on my list without buying them? Yes. In fact, I went to my library, my local library, which you all know I enthuse about so much. I went there this last Tuesday, and I found three books that were on my Read What You Own Amazon wish list that were there in the library. I was so pleased. I found Open Water by Caleb Azuma Nelson. I found Memento Mori by Muriel Spark, and I found The Bird Way by Jennifer Ackerman. So all those have come home with me, and you will probably be seeing reviews of those before my challenge is over, because library books count as Read What I Own, because I pay taxes, so I own, well, you know what I mean. They are as good as owned books in my mind. Of that whole Read What You Own wish list so far, what am I most likely to buy when the challenge ends? Well, nonfiction, I think, because it's so much more difficult to get a hold of nonfiction. My library doesn't stock quite as much, and the ebook libraries, they tend to do very popular nonfiction titles, and I like heavier going kind of stuff, as you already know. So these are 5 books that I think I'm definitely going to buy as soon as the challenge is over, and they are The Ottoman Endgame by Sean McMeekin. That's about the ending of the Ottoman Empire after the First World War, and I think also goes into some detail sort of about the first years of the 20th century and how that empire was losing strength and winding down. Then I'd love a biography of Tolstoy, and I understand that from Orlando Figes that the A.N. Wilson biography is a good one. I'd like to read How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler. I don't know if I expect that to change the way I read, but a lot of people are recommending it on BookTube, and those tend to be serious readers of heavy fiction and nonfiction as well. So I think, okay, are they getting something from Mortimer Adler's book? I need to know. And then These Truths by Jill Lepore. In fact, I do need to work on my American history. And These Truths is a myth iconoclasm book. Does that make sense? She wants to take down some of the myths about American history. I probably need to learn the original versions, but never mind, I could do that by reading Jill's book. And then, of course, I need a biography of George Eliot now. I have never read one, and I've been going through Middlemarch so slowly, so carefully. I think you need to know this woman. You need to know. So I've chosen the biography by Gordon Haight. And so probably those 5 books, they're definitely going to get purchased, definitely going to get read. Here we are in Foyles, the sacred place. Well, just from my point of view anyway. So of course that's to prove we were there, and to prove that I found a corner of the bookshop that didn't have any people in it, which was kind of lovely as well. Has this challenge changed me? Yes, and I'm very surprised that it has, because I thought I would have a terrible time not buying books. And I'd watched other booktubers, and I could see their struggle. I could see that they would sometimes cave in. And I'm not saying that in the next 6 months that might not happen here. Watch this space. I will report. But I especially thought that I would miss the fun of just putting ebooks on my Kindle library. Yeah. I thought I would be unable to go into a bookshop without buying a book. But that has happened on several occasions, and it hasn't been the problem that I thought it was going to be. If I were to also talk about what it did for me, it really made me appreciate that I had books on my shelves that were good books, and yet I had waited a decade more to read them. And 3 examples come to mind immediately, which have been reviewed in my earlier videos. Shoot by George Bowering, a magnificent book about the McLean brothers, a piece of local history that kind of got lost. And of course, it partly got lost because the people involved were half white, half indigenous North American, and therefore they didn't fit well into either community. They became alienated, and of course their story just kind of faded away, and that was unfortunate. So I was really glad that George Bowering, and I'm glad to meet him as an author, because also as an author it was quite clear he championed the underdog, the less noticed, the small publishers even, and I like that about him. And I thought, wow, I admire him for not courting more fame, more notoriety, bigger publishers, probably bigger deals. I like that he chose to keep it real. Does that make sense? I really admire that in him as a writer. So I'm going to seek out more of his work. Also, Natasha's Dance by Orlando Figes, The Cultural History of Russia, was an astounding book. Really beautifully researched, spanned 250 years, and really gave me a sense of when Russians create art, what are they trying to do? What matters to them? What is significant to them? And that's going to be so helpful if I pick up Dostoevsky, or I reread Tolstoy's War and Peace, or read Anna Karenina. I'm going to understand what do these writers want? What are they hoping to achieve in the writing of their book? And therefore why their fiction might be different from, say, English 19th century or 20th century fiction. That's important. And then third, The Hearing Trumpet by Leonora Carrington. Leonora Carrington. If you haven't read The Hearing Trumpet, maybe I didn't stress it enough in my reviews. I'll stress it now. It's a thin little book that is magnificent. It's simply magnificent, and it should be better known. Please go read it. The world will turn upside down, but you'll love it. That's how good she is. You'll be fine with that. Okay. And so this is the number one reason why, when this challenge is over, I do want to continue to have a goal of reading books that I already own, because I realize that the joy of buying books, and there is a joy in it, in acquiring new books, that joy is taking away from me the joy of discovering the books that I already have, and that is, I need to consider that a problem and to keep working on it. Foyles also have a wonderful cafe at the top of the building, and they serve an amazing carrot cake, which you can see here. Definitely, if you ever get there, carrot cake, top floor cafe. Right, final part of this sideline video. What do I think I'm going to do when my challenge ends on the 31st of October? Goal setting, I think, is definitely going to change. Goal setting is going to focus on page quantity, not book quantity. In fact, I'm even thinking of lowering the book quantity, expecting to read fewer books, but really, because what I want to read longer books without worrying about it. Whereas I do find there is an element of anxiety month on month about how am I going to get at least 4 books read, when I want to read these longer books, which I still think are worth reading, definitely worth reading. I need to take away the whole issue of how many books I read per month. And so I'm going to have to say, no, page count is what matters. Pages read, not books read. And I'm still going to have some limit on my book buying. Now, why? because I think what this challenge has done, especially having the 4 wildcard books, it's made me really focus when I go into a bookshop or when I'm looking on Amazon. I am now focusing on what is the best book I can buy. If I can only buy one book, what's the best book? The book I'm most likely to read shortly after I buy it. What is that book? What is the book that's actually worth laying out money for and bringing home and finding space for? If it's a physical book, I have to find space for it. I don't have a lot of space. So I want to decide to buy books by choice and stop buying on impulse. Now, maybe that won't work, but what I'm saying I'm going to do is I'm still going to have a quota for books going forward. It'll just be much more generous than, the 4 books that I allowed myself this year. It was very, very drastic with myself. And I'm hoping that the quota will encourage me to check also whether I can borrow that book, whether I don't have to buy that book. And so I will continue to have a read what I own target of some kind. And I'll also have a read what I borrow target, because I really want to use the library more. I did pull back a little bit because I was trying to focus on what was on my shelves. But now I think, okay, I've done that, but I love what's at the library too, and I want to encourage the library to keep buying new books and good books. And to do that, I need to start taking them out in quantity. So I want to do a read what I borrow goal as well. And I'm going to try and get you a little table to show you where I think I'm going to go. So I'm thinking about a 3-way split, okay? A third of my reading to be books I already own, a third to be books that I borrow, and a third to be books that I purchase. Now that's got some wiggle room, right? You can see that what I'm doing, I'm setting myself a page goal, and this is a little bit ambitious in terms of pages, but let's see, 17,000 pages. That means a lot more pages. Now I might adjust that, but I'm going to take down the number of books. Instead of hoping for a 50 book year, I'm going to say 45, but I might even adjust that down to something that lowers the book count per month. So let's say, take it down to 3 books per month instead of my usual 4. So that'd be 36 books in a year. But that allows me to read some much, much bigger books. So you can see the sliding scale I've got. So I can read 15 to 18 of this 45 can be read what I own. 15 to 18 can be read what I borrow. And between 12 and 15. So I want it lower. I want new books to lower still for another year, because I still feel like there's a lot out there that I already own, that I need to read, that are good books. A lot of books out there that I can borrow. I do not need to buy. I do not need to fill my bookshelves with them, and I do not need to deplete my bank account in order to read them. So I want to focus on that. So focusing on page numbers would allow me to read more long books, of course. Now the tricky thing with that is, how do I produce the same amount of booktube content, right? Because my booktube content has kind of now, it's becoming comfortable with the idea that I'm going to read 4 books of some kind per month. The vlogs I have produced, though, with the longer books that I've read, like the Catherine the Great vlog, the Natasha's Dance vlogs, those have been, popular in my terms. People have much higher numbers of views than I do, but for me, I see a lot of people looking at those vlogs. So I may structure my reviews differently. I may divide up my reviews, read a longer book and then divide up the review of it into 2 or 3 parts. So maybe start by talking about the physical details of the book, the price, how I obtained it, and the author's biography in the early stages of my reading, and then return later to talk about setting, viewpoint, structure, problematic content, and all that. And I can pitch the book sort of last of all when I have finished, and give further reading recommendations. That might seem weird, but it means that I could talk about those aspects of the book in even more detail, which might be helpful. And I could also, another option, start another close reading like the Middlemarch Meditations. I think I would choose a shorter book, but I would choose another one in the public domain, and one that has been on my mind for some time is Ford Madox Ford's The Good Soldier. This book I studied at university. I had to write an assignment on it. I adored my close reading of this book. Or I could review and do some close reading of short stories, or essays, some shorter forms of reading that I could fit in easily while I'm still reading a longer book. That's happening right now. Catherine the Great has taken me the whole month of April to read. However, I've been able to fit in some shorter nonfiction like, What Sport Tells Us About Life, those kind of books. And I could also look up online articles about reading or subscribe to a good literary magazine about reading and maybe talk through the contents of each issue. What I probably would not do to fill in, I probably wouldn't do more tags. I think I do just enough tags to have a change of, content, just to keep it light. Also, I won't do hauls or unhauls. I have been unhauling books. I have filled a couple of boxes with probably, I'd say, about 25 to 30 books that have gone out of my shelves because now I've read some of them, and the person who watches television, he's contributed some books, so we're thinning down our shelves. But I'm really sorry, everybody who makes all the unhaul videos. I've tried to watch them. I just don't find them interesting. I really want to know about what's been read. I don't really want to know what people are buying or getting rid of, because it doesn't really tell me much about the books. So that's it, everybody. That is my goals and where I've got to and everything about this 6-month point in the challenge. Hope you guys are doing really, really well. Have a great month of May, and I will see you in a few days' time. Take care. Bye-bye.